بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, brothers. Welcome to our second IDsoc forum of this semester. The title is to imitate or not to imitate. So last week we talked about what is the true wealth of a nation. And we said that the ideas a nation carries is the strongest asset it has. And one of the problems we find today, or probably the biggest problem we find today amongst Muslims, is that there's a lot of imitation on Western ideas. And that is what has led to decline, to the very bad state we live in today. But there are times when Muhammad ﷺ himself, even though he did order us not to imitate the kuffar, there were some times when he actually did take things from the kuffar. So where is the line drawn between halal imitation and progress, and haram imitation and decline? So today we have Esaa Chaudry, who is the founder of the Ideological Society. He started this project 4 years ago, I think it was 4 years ago. So, pass on to him.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. So the topic of today's discussion, or talk rather, is to imitate or not to imitate. And I'm sure, as you understood, Brother Yusuf was going through earlier about, he was talking a little bit about the civilization, the Western civilization and the Islamic civilization. Last week he mentioned as well, and a little bit of the history of it. But today we're talking about what we can adopt, what we can imitate with, whether it be clothing, whether it be ideas, whether it be wearing jewelry, whatever. We're going to be discussing that, inshallah. So I want to open up with a question. What is an idiot? Does anyone know what an idiot is? An adult with a child's brain. It's not that. What is an idiot? Does anyone know? Okay, don't check the dictionary.com. An idiot, in today's day and age, unfortunately has changed its meaning. It just means a man or woman that makes wrong decisions. But back in the day, and George, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it has Greek origins, which comes from idiotis. I don't know if I said that right. Which means someone who is unskilled, which means someone actually who does not care about anything apart from himself. That is what an idiot is. So an idiot, in actual fact, is someone who does not delve into any understanding of what's going on in the world, what's going on right in front of him. He doesn't care about anything but himself. The sad reality is that today, most of us are idiots because we are only focused on ourselves. We're only focused on, for example, perfecting this part of ourselves, trying to do this right, trying to do that right, while neglecting our global obligations. So it's become so much so, it's become that, the reality is that we are such idiots that even the mere mention of the word politics becomes, it's one of those like taboo words almost. Oh yeah, you know what, I had a discussion with this guy, and we were talking about this and the other. What? You're talking about Syria? You're talking about this? You're talking about politics? No man, politics is all corrupt. And people are quick to brush that aside, that politics is all corrupt. But we should have this understanding that actually politics, which is governing the affairs of the Muslims in our case, governing the affairs of the people, is something crucial and something which you cannot take away from Islam. So going back to the actual, bear that in mind throughout the entire session, inshallah. So going back to imitate and not to imitate, or not to imitate, we need to understand two concepts here. They are called Hadara and Medinia. Hadara is civilization. It translates to become civilization. But it's a lot deeper than that. As we know, Arabic is a very deep language. It means actually the thoughts, the ideas, the concepts, the values of this certain Hadara. So Hadara means the thoughts, ideas and concepts of a certain ideology. Whereas Medinia is the material progress. It's talking about specifically objects. It's talking about specifically, for example, the iPad. It's just linked to science and technology, but it's not necessarily linked to hadara, a certain hadara. Now, to understand and compare rather the two hadaras that we see blatant for ourselves, we've got the Western hadara and we've got the Islamic hadara. The Western hadara is, as Yusuf explained earlier, the separation of deen from the state. Now what does that mean? That means that no religion rather, has any authority when it comes to stately matters, when it comes to current affairs, when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to making laws. Like, there is no religion that can have any say in this. But rather, the Western hadara is that we need to enjoy and we need to find the maximum benefit and the maximum pleasure in things, in anything, in any way, shape or form. Not only that, but the spiritual side, the spiritual aspect, going back to my first point, which is the separation of deen from state, the spiritual side is completely neglected, or rather it's completely restricted to certain places. So, for example, the churches, the masjids, the synagogues, etc., etc. Other than that, religion doesn't go out of those spheres. There are no moral, there are no humanitarian, and there are no spiritual values that exist at all, actually, in the Western hadara. The only value that exists is materialism, is the materialistic pursuit. And I'll give you an example. The Iraq War, for example, in 2001, they claimed there were weapons of mass destruction. There weren't any weapons of mass destruction, but what happened? Resources we literally got pillaged. Resources were taken, and that country is now crippled for their own benefit. They only saw the materialistic gains. However, the Islamic, contrasting this with the Islamic hadara, we have a system that Allah has established, which is based upon man, life, and the universe, on what is, on our understanding of man, life, and the universe, and what is acceptable. And this is completely based upon the Islamic Aqidah. So we know, likewise, the Aqidah is the basis of the hadara. So hadara, which is civilization, the thoughts and the concepts, etc., behind all that, behind that civilization, it all emanates from the Aqidah of that certain ideology. Same, likewise, with Islam. Our hadara comes from, our civilization comes from our Aqidah, which is based on spirituality. And I'll go into that a little bit later. So it's clear, just from what I've explained about the Western hadara and the Islamic hadara, that they contradict each other in every sense, every single sense. On the one hand, you have the Western hadara, which is happiness through material pursuit. You will only be happy with buying, with having this, with having that. Whereas Islam says happiness comes from Allah's pleasure. An example of Medinia, so hadara is civilization, Medinia is the material progress. So an example of Medinia is, say for example, a photograph or a painting. These things are completely legit. But if the painting or the photograph was of, I'm not sure if you guys have been to the Tate, but on the second floor, they just have a massive, massive painting of a naked black man. And it's so weird. And I don't know why they have that there. But to the West, to the Western hadara, to the Western mind, this is art. Seeing some naked man with his piece hanging out is a piece of art. Whereas for us, it is not. We find it offensive. Because for us, it's about protecting honor. And that is very dishonorable. Another example of Medinia would be, for example, clothing. So all of us here wearing trainers, maybe jeans, maybe wearing this and the other, yeah? That's all perfectly acceptable. It's not related to the hadara of a certain, it's not related to the aqidah of a certain hadara. So it's not related to the Western hadara. But if we started, rocking like crosses, there's a big problem there. Because the cross represents Christianity and it is the Christian hadara. Now, with the problems that we face today, it's clear that the Western hadara, it is the Western aqidah that has led man into chaos. It is a clear contradiction of man's fitra, i.e. man's actual nature. Man has a need to worship something. Man has an instinct, the reverence instinct. And to neglect this spiritual aspect is only going to cause harm. And the way the Western hadara kind of caters for this, that caters for restricting or neglecting this reverence instinct, is that you focus on benefit. You focus on just doing what is right for you, me, myself, and I. Individualism. And it is due to this benefit being the foundation that colonization is inevitable. Colonization exists. Because if I'm only going to go out for benefit, then I don't care about anyone else. Why would I? Like I said, look back at the Iraq example. They didn't care about the lives that they destroyed. How millions of lives that they destroyed, they didn't care. But what happened? They got what they wanted. They got the resources. They crippled a Muslim country. Another example could be that how their morals are completely unstable. Because benefit is the foundation, morals are unstable. Now, in Colorado, very recently, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this, they're selling crack pipes in vending machines. They're selling crack pipes in vending machines for dirt cheap as well. It is ridiculous. And then in other places, drugs are becoming legalized constantly. So morals are completely unstable. On the one hand, you know, we've seen the bad effects that drugs have. We've seen the completely negative effects that drugs have here, even in Britain. And in America, it's a lot worse, but they don't care. It's about the benefit. If they can tax people for it, if they can make money off it themselves, why not do it? Now, Islam, on the other hand, never had any colonial practices. It didn't differentiate between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. This meant that there was only justice for everyone who submitted towards its reign, i.e., who was in the state of Islam. And this is due to the spiritual foundation of the system, which gives the morals, which gives the spiritual and even the materialistic values. So under an Islamic state, under Sharia, we would have morals. We know what is right and wrong. It is very clear. Our morals don't change so that one day being gay is bad and then the other day it's okay. We've seen it here, isn't it? Only recently have they started putting up those crazy posters saying some people are gay, get over it. Like, prop it in your face. We don't have that. We don't have these double standards. So we have that moral value. We also have the spiritual aspect, the spiritual value, in the sense that everything we do, everything, that means from buying halal meat, that means from smiling at someone else, we know that there is reward in it. And the whole system is based on that, is based on the spiritual values. So we try and attain, and why is it that that exists? It's because we're trying to attain Allah's pleasure, right? And even the materialistic values exist as well, in the sense that Islam has its own economic system, and it caters for everyone, in the sense of trying to earn money, trying to attain the rizq. Now, to understand Islam a bit, I'm going to go into the Islamic Hadara a bit deeper. We need to understand the aim of the Sharia. It is to facilitate a happier life in the dunya and the akhirah for everyone. For everyone. And to understand and to accept Sharia means it must be accepted and considered in its totality. Any absence of one part of the Sharia means, or one part or more parts of the Sharia, means that the aims will not be fulfilled and its purpose will not be fulfilled. So if we look, I'll give you an example, if I'll go into it further rather. If we look at any verse with relation to laws, we see that any violation of these laws, there are two kinds of punishments. We see that there's a punishment in this life and there's a punishment in the akhirah. We see that there's a secular punishment, we see that there's a punishment in the dunya and the punishment in the akhirah, the celestial punishment. So for example, with the thief, he will get his hand chopped off here. but there's also maybe punishment later on in the hellfire. Same with the liar, same with the murderer. And all of these laws in Islam contain these sanctions that are indivisible. You cannot separate them. But in recent times, we've seen rulers and scholars abandoning these aspects or certain aspects because, for example, the had, i.e. the actual punishment system, due to Western influence and the fear of foreign indignation. So with Western influence, meaning, and I'm going to go into a history of that, meaning that they were able to pass on their concepts and their ideas so well that they got these rulers and they got these people to leave the Shara, to stop implementing. And leading on from last week, in the 19th century, just to go into the history of it a bit more, in the 19th century, we saw that the Muslims were turning away from the laws and legislations in Islam and starting to adopt foreign ideas and the foreign policies that they had. In the early 19th century, imperialism first infiltrated the Muslim world, and although the Muslims had their own definitive legal system, i.e. the Shara, the European laws were actually implemented on the countries that they occupied. So these countries, so the British, the French and the Dutch, whichever land they were occupying, they got them to implement man-made laws. And these Muslims that were there, unfortunately the Muslims were unbelievably confused at this time, but the Muslims that were there in power, or the scholars, they were trained under these rulers and they were given opportunities to study abroad. They were given these opportunities to do X, Y and Z, which led the imperialists to find allies within the natives of that land. So forget just your own agents being there. They got the Muslims on their side, saying, you know what, we don't need Sharia. You know what, we don't need this. So you had the likes of Mustafa Kemal, you had the likes of Ataturk. And so these imperialists, not only were they able to get these the indigenous people of these lands, but these indigenous people, these people that were trained under these rulers, were able to influence the ulama. They were able to influence the scholars at the time, who completely compromised. They compromised to the extent where they created a new set of laws, which was not Sharia and which is not British or Western law. It was called Anglo-Mohammedan law. Anglo-Mohammedan law. The ulama, just to give you an example of how confused the Muslims were, the ulama were so confused that they couldn't differentiate between general Medinia, i.e. science, technology, and Hadara Medinia, i.e. the Medinia which is related to their Hadara, related the material things that are related to the Western Hadara. They couldn't tell the difference. So you had scholars saying, you know what, we can't use telephones. Telephones are haram. Because on the other end you've got shaitan. You've got shaitan on the other end of the telephone. So they were so confused that they couldn't tell the difference between Hadara and Madaniya. But they wanted to be able to progress as much as the West did. Unfortunately, the imitation is still real, even today. So whether it is people like Muslims, hopefully none of us, inshallah, but Muslims trying to imitate the West when it comes to the smallest things, such as celebrating New Year's Day, or celebrating, okay, maybe not celebrating Christmas, that's a bit whack, but celebrating New Year's or celebrating X, Y, and Z. So you've got that aspect to adopting their entire system. As Yusuf was saying earlier, there is no country in this world that is implementing Islam, even though there are so many Muslim countries, even though there are so many Muslim rulers, even though we have so many scholars, there is no country. So you've got people imitating the West when it comes to, on the individual level of, you know, adopting their ideas and celebrating X, Y, and Z, and you've got countries, you've got rulers that have imitated their complete hadara, their complete system. So much so, I'll give you just an example. The Ottoman Empire, the Uthmani Khilafah, was destroyed by Ataturk. And one of the things that he did whilst destroying it was he changed even the alphabet. He changed it. he changed it and he removed Arabic. He removed Arabic from schools. He stopped the adhan. He stopped many things. It got to that extent. And unfortunately, the effects of the Western Hadara has trickled down to even us, the layman, where we've adopted the values such as me, myself, and I. And just to quote one article that I was reading, was success is defined materially instead of spiritually. Muslim youth will seek to climb the corporate ladder and emulate Donald Trump instead of Abu Bakr. And you've got to a point where politics has become a subject, like I was saying earlier, where we don't talk about it. It's too corrupt. All politics is corrupt. And it's made us apolitical. And this is not Islamic in any way. Rather, it means that we've adopted the Western Hadara. It means we've adopted that idea of individualism, of me, myself, and I. And some have become so involved that they themselves promote the Western values. And some of them, unfortunately, under the guise of Islam. So, for example, you've got the niqab ban in France. And unfortunately, if you heard what some of the sisters were saying, they were saying, it's my choice. I am free to wear the niqab. I am free to wear it. Actually, no, you're not. If you believe that you should be wearing it, it's not because you're free to wear it. It's because Allah has told you that you need to wear it, if that is the opinion that you take. But rather, they're taking it from the Western side of saying, we are free to wear it. So it's gotten to that extent, that it's trickled down to us, even to that extent. So, really and truly now, it is our job to know the haqq from the batil. I hope, inshallah, you've learned something today. And the moral of the story is, like I was explaining earlier, don't be an idiot. Jazakallah khair for listening.
Jazakallah khair, Esaa.